If your cigar feels tight, hard to draw, like you're fighting it the entire time, especially with a torpedo, there's a good chance it's not the cigar, it's the cut. And once you understand how airflow actually moves through a cigar, a lot of these problems start to make sense. A tight draw isn't just annoying, it changes the entire way the cigar burns. You end up pulling harder to get more smoke, which overheats the cherry and can make the cigar taste harsher than it should. At the same time, you're getting less airflow through the cigar, so the smoke feels thin and restricted. So if it feels like the cigar is plugged, what's usually happening is airflow is being restricted right at the head. Torpedoes are more sensitive to this than most cigars because of their shape. The head tapers down to a narrow point. That means all of your airflow is being funneled through a smaller and smaller area as it reaches your mouth. On a straight cigar, you've got a wider opening to work with. On a torpedo, everything depends on how the tip is opened. So even small mistakes in the cut changes how easily air passes through the cigar. Now look at what a straight cut actually does to that shape. You're making a flat cut across the narrowest part of the cigar. That creates a small opening, and all the airflow has to pass through it. If you cut too shallow, that opening is even smaller. If you cut too low into the taper, you can actually compress the structure around it. Either way, you're increasing resistance, and that resistance is what makes you feel like the cigar has a tight draw. If you're using a guillotine cutter, there are two things that matter: placement and angle. Most people focus on where they cut, but the angle changes the shape of the opening. When you cut straight across, you get a flat, circular opening. But if you angle the cut around 45 degrees, you're effectively increasing the surface area of that opening without cutting deeper into the cigar. That reduces how much the air has to squeeze through a single point. So, instead of a tight, restricted draw, you get a smoother path of airflow. It's a small adjustment, but it directly reduces resistance at the head. A V-cut takes that a step further, and this is where the difference really shows up. With a straight cut, all you're doing is opening the tip. Air has to pass through that one opening, with very little interaction with the inside of the cigar. That's why it can feel restricted, especially on a torpedo. A V-cut changes that. Instead of just opening the tip, it cuts down into the cigar and exposes more of the internal filler. So now, air isn't being forced through a single point. It's moving through a channel that runs along the inside of the cigar. That does two things. It increases the surface area available for airflow, and it reduces resistance by spreading that airflow out, so the draw feels more open and more consistent. That's why a V-cut can perform better on a torpedo, even though you're technically removing less material. And if you're worried about cutting too deep, there are cutters with built-in backstops that keep you from going too far. You don't need to be aggressive, just enough to open that channel and let the cigar breathe. And if you're already smoking it and it feels tight, you don't have to just deal with it. You can fix it mid-smoke, because the issue isn't the entire cigar, it's the restriction at the head. So by slightly recutting it, you're reopening that airflow path. Even a small adjustment can reduce resistance, enough to completely change how the cigar draws. You don't need to take off a big cut, just enough to open it up. And if you're doing that, make sure you're using your cutter. You probably don't want to hand your buddy back a cutter covered in your saliva. At the end of the day, a tight draw doesn't always mean a bad cigar. Most of the time, it just means airflow is being restricted at the head. And small changes, like how you cut it, can completely change how that cigar performs. So next time that you light up a torpedo, pay attention to that first draw, because that's where you'll find the difference immediately.